Hey everybody, Dr. Glenn here, and it's Tuesday at 12:30, so it's time for Dr. Glenn Live. And today I want to talk to you about sugar cravings. So if you're tuning in out there, just type something in the box. Let me know that you can hear me fine, and let me bring up my first little picture here. And we want to talk about what happens in a sugar addiction cycle. Now, this is really important, especially in North America and the U.S., because we eat so much sugar and so much carbohydrate. And that's what we've been told to eat. We've been told for the last 40 years we're supposed to eat lots of carbohydrates and not very much fat and protein because eating fat causes you to be fat, which is not true. And eating fat also runs up your cholesterol, which causes heart disease, which is also not true. You know, whenever you run into these things and you say, well, that's what I've been told for years and years, just remember this. There was a time when intelligent men thought the earth was flat. Yep. And they even put Galileo under house arrest for the rest of his life for saying that the earth was not flat and that the sun was the center of the solar system and not the earth. So let's look at this. So here's what happens. Got my little marker here. When you eat sugar, you crave it. And the reason that you crave it is because it has addictive properties and it stimulates opiate receptors in the brain. That's why we call sugar or carbohydrates comfort food. Nobody ever accused broccoli of being a comfort food. So when you eat sugar, you come over here and you get a blood sugar spike. When you get a blood sugar spike, dopamine is released in the brain, and that is what causes the sugar craving and the sugar addiction. Remember, dopamine along with serotonin actually also goes up here. This little graphic doesn't show that, but serotonin and dopamine go up when you eat sugar, and they make you feel better. That's why they're called comfort food, but they also do a lot of other things. And when you get this blood sugar spike in the brain, you get a bunch of insulin secreted into the blood to try to bring that back down. And I'm going to go over that in just a minute. Then what happens is your blood sugar will fall rapidly. And when your blood sugar falls, the high insulin will cause you to take that carbohydrate or that sugar that's now in your blood and stores it in your climate controlled fat storage facility. You thought it was a spare tire. It's not a spare tire. It is a climate controlled fat storage facility that you carry around with you in case someday you go to the grocery store and there isn't anything on the shelves. But that doesn't happen very often. I think it is happening in Venezuela right now, but it's not happening here in Northern Virginia, I can tell you that. So what happens is your body craves the lost sugar high. Remember, the sugar high it makes you have dopamine and serotonin, so it makes you feel good. That's why we call it a comfort food. Then what happens is when your blood sugar falls, you get hunger and cravings again because you have low blood sugar level. So that causes you to increase your appetite and the cravings come back up, and then you're right back in the same cycle again. And you're craving and then you're eating sugar. So I'm going to take that one down and let me bring you up another one. You know, we have three basic types of foods. We have fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Yeah, I know. I always thought peanut butter was a food group, and so were Twinkies. But no, there's just carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And you can see them right here. And this is what happens to your blood sugar when you eat a carbohydrate. You get a huge spike in your blood sugar, and then you come back down. And so one of the rules of thumb that you can just kind of keep it in your, in the back of your mind just from now on is that if you get tired, crash, sleepy, or whatever, an hour or two after eating, you have just eaten too many carbohydrates. Now, I know everybody thinks that the tryptophan in turkey is what makes you sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner. Well, there's really not enough tryptophan in the turkey to do that. It do a little bit. But the reason we all get sleep and we fall asleep on the couch and in the recliner after Thanksgiving dinner is because we ate too many carbohydrates. You know, the mashed potatoes, the mac and cheese, 2 pieces of pie, 3 pieces of pie at my house, and all this stuff. And this is what causes your blood sugar to go up. Then you crash during the football game after Thanksgiving dinner. On the other hand, fat and protein, they take much longer to digest, and they don't raise your blood sugar as high. As a matter of fact, fat raise your blood sugar the least amount. Now, we were all told growing up that eating fat makes you fat. That is not true. Okay? As a matter of fact, eating fat gives you long, sustained energy over a much longer period of time than eating sugar does. Now, here's what happens. Your blood sugar goes up. Well, that's not good. The body doesn't like that. So let me switch over here to a different picture and let me show you what happens. So here's what happens. Your blood sugar goes up after eating, and once you get up into this range here, your blood is going up there in that 7 or 8 range. That is not good. So your adrenal glands rush in to save you from high blood sugar. They dump a bunch of insulin into the blood, and that drives your sugar back down. And what happens is it will overshoot the mark. And so what happens to you then is you go down into this dip right here, and this is called reactive hypoglycemia. And that's what happens when you feel like you crash or you're tired an hour to 2 hours after eating. Also, if you're waking up around 3 o'clock in the morning and you cannot go back to sleep for about an hour or so, you're in this trough right here. You're in a reactive hypoglycemic state. On the other hand, when you eat foods that are lower in carbohydrates, or what this is saying right here, a low glycemic index, all right, what happens is your blood sugar rises slower and not as high, and when it comes back down, it comes right back down where it ought to be instead of dropping into this super low area right here. So that's a good rule of thumb for you. If you feel tired, sleepy, anything like that, about an hour to 2 hours after eating, you've eaten too many carbohydrates. And I know we've been told our whole lives that carbohydrates are good for us. Well, that is not true. Let me get down here. I want to show you what happens in insulin resistance. So remember this, insulin resistance. When you eat too many carbohydrates, you dump too much insulin into the blood too often. And what will happen there is you start to store the stuff around the middle. So you're feeling tired and hungry because your blood sugar's crashed back down. So what do you eat? Your body eats more bad carbs. Bad carbs are things that are high glycemic index. It's not just Snickers bars and Twinkies. Even a banana. A banana is like a sugar stick. So anything that runs your blood sugar up like that, whether it occurs naturally in nature, like real sweet fruits, or whether it's made by, I can't say a company's name, but if it's made and it comes in a wrapper, if it runs your blood sugar up too high, it's a bad carbohydrate. By the way, that reminds me, if you're an athlete, remember this, there's no such thing as carbo loading. Big myth. I used to race bicycles. I even raced in Europe for a little bit, and we thought we were so smart. We were smarter than the Europeans, because we were eating pasta for dinner and all this stuff. You know what? I just showed you in a graph. When you eat a lot of carbohydrates, within a couple of hours, your blood sugar's back down, and you've turned that stuff into fat that you have to carry up the mountains. When we always wonder, why were the Europeans eating steaks at night? Well, because protein doesn't do that to you. So what happens is you eat the bad carbs, you make a bunch of insulin to bring your blood sugar back down. That causes the cells to resist insulin. Now, if you have tried dieting and or exercise and you cannot lose the weight, probability is you are insulin resistant. Now, so the insulin, because you can't burn off the sugar, you end up storing it as fat. So when you drive yourself into insulin resistance, you're actually working against yourself in the whole weight loss routine thing. So, and if you have questions, just go ahead and type them in. Love to see your questions. And also, when you store the fat, your blood sugar drops, and then you will feel hungry and tired again. And you just get into this cycle. You just go round and round and round in that. Now, one of the things about carbohydrates that, when we thought that eating grain, and grain is the perfect example of a carbohydrate that we've been told for years is really, really good for us, that's actually not really, really good for us. They say heart healthy whole grains. Well, whole grains are not heart healthy, and they're not healthy at all because they're carbohydrates. Carbohydrates drive up this thing called inflammation, and what we do not want is inflammation. me show you another. I'm going to come over here and let's talk about some clinical issues that you ought to be aware of. One of the things that blood sugar does to you is it causes stress and it increases your cortisol level. The other thing it does is you start to produce so much serotonin and dopamine that you actually start to become resistant to serotonin and dopamine. If you are taking antidepressive drugs, SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, you may have noticed that over the years they have to increase your dosage, or they might even have to switch you to a different drug, because what happens over time is you desensitize yourself to serotonin and dopamine. And that's why when we work on helping patients get off their drugs, and you can get off these things, but you have to be careful because you have to slowly bring them down while you resensitize the cells to serotonin and dopamine. Then there's some other things that can cause sugar craving, and those are mineral deficiencies. And I want to show you about that. So let me come over here. And this is a great little chart right here. Check this out. If you crave chocolate, there's a good chance you have a magnesium deficiency. All right. And if you're craving sugary foods, there's a good chance you have a chromium, carbon, phosphorus, sulfur, or even tryptophan deficiency. And one of the things about chocolate too is that tends to go along with dopamine and serotonin as well. If you're craving refined carbohydrates like pasta, bread, and other things like that, could be having a nitrogen. Oily foods, if you crave that, quite often it's a sign of a calcium deficiency. And if you're craving salty foods, quite often it's the sign of a chloride or a silicone deficiency. That's a great little chart there for you. And if you want to catch that, you might want to come back later and watch it again and pause the video, and you can write those things down. Let me give you a few of my personal tips for beating sugar cravings. One of the things that you may want to do is you may want to test your cortisol. And we can do that. As a matter of fact, you can see behind me over my shoulder right there. I've got a bunch of these tests. These are from Diagnostics. We use these for checking adrenal salivary index, and that's where you can map out your cortisol. If you want to get that done, you can give us a call at the office. We can get this test run for you, and we can actually map your cortisol levels. It's an especially good thing to do if you think you might have an adrenal fatigue issue. And you can see down there in the lower corner, there's the phone number of the office. If you want to run that test, just give Lenine a call, and she can help you get taken care of. So you may want to test your cortisol. You need to avoid high carbohydrate intake. And think about it like this. The other thing you're going to want to do is stop eating in the car. I know it's not convenient, but here's the thing. When you're driving, you're stressed, or at least everybody around you hopes that you're at a heightened state of awareness so you don't run into anybody else. That's called stress. Stress is not good or bad, it just is. So when you drive, your stress level is higher. Well, it's supposed to be. The worst time in the world for you to eat a carbohydrate is when your stress is up because you're making more cortisol. Now you're making more insulin. So the worst thing in the world that you can do as far as eating goes is to go through the drive-through and get something, one, wrapped in a carbohydrate. That's what a bun or a tortilla or something is. That's a carbohydrate. So your hamburger is wrapped in a carbohydrate. The last thing you want to do is to eat carbohydrates while you're stressed out. So don't eat while you're driving. You need to incorporate more protein and fat into your diet, and you'll notice that recently this has been a sort of getting a lot of press lately. A lot more fat, a lot more protein. 1977 is when they did the Senate subcommittee. George McGovern chaired the Senate subcommittee on diet and nutrition. They rewrote the food pyramid, and they put grain at the bottom of the pyramid as the foundation for the pyramid. Bad news, bad idea. We've been fighting that ever since. You also want to get sufficient, better quality, and consistent sleep. I'm going to show you a little study on that in just a second. Use nuts and berries as your snack. Nuts and berries are great. Berries are good because they have low sugar, and nuts are good because they have fat and protein in them. Also, you may want to be eating foods with high bioavailability of chromium, magnesium, zinc, iron and calcium. And also, if you want to come back and watch the video again, stop it right there, write those down, Google those things, and find out what foods are high in those minerals. Last thing I want to do is I want to show you a little study here, a study that compared good sleep with those who didn't get good sleep. And what they found is when you don't get good sleep, you tend to crave junk food to the tune on average of 600 or more calories per day. That's a lot. Well, this is Dr. Glenn. Thank you so much for being here today on Dr. Glenn Live. If you want to ask me questions, just type them in. I come back. I watch the box under the video all week long. If you've got a question, even if you weren't able to be here live, just type your questions in there. I'll answer your questions. Also, if you would like to request a topic for Dr. Glenn Live, go to drglennlive@gmail.com and send me an email. And if you request a topic and it's something that I'm comfortable talking about, I'll be happy to answer your questions and even put together a Dr. Glenn Live about the topic that you request. So hope you have a wonderful day today. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next Tuesday, 12:30, Dr. Glenn Live.